Hello, and welcome to Episode 8 of Time Travel Talk. Have you ever heard about the Philadelphia experiment? Some say it was about invisibility, others say it was about teleportation, and even time travel is occasionally mentioned, partly because of a movie released in the summer of 1984 titled The Philadelphia Experiment, which has elements of all three theories. What's cool about the beginning of this film is they imply to us that indeed the government was doing an experiment and that we are about to watch what may have possibly happened. The movie begins in the year 1943 during World War II, and we are introduced to the main characters of David Herdeg and Jimmy Parker, who are good friends and naval sailors assigned to a destroyer escort ship called the USS Eldridge. This particular ship was rigged with special electronics for an experiment to determine if it could render itself invisible to enemy radar. As the experiment commences, the Eldridge not only becomes invisible to radar, but vanishes completely into some sort of space and time vortex, which frightens David and Jimmy, so they decide to jump overboard. Instead of splashing into the water, they find themselves in a desolate, unknown location in the middle of the night. They are quickly approached by what at first looks like a UFO, which follows and even shoots at them, as we realize it's a modern-day helicopter. Jimmy accidentally makes contact with an electrified fence, which somehow creates a bolt of electricity that hits and destroys the helicopter. After a long, cold walk, they finally reach a small gas station that has a diner, so they go inside and order some food while being amazed by the diner's television. Meanwhile, a very strange weather phenomenon is developing that somehow causes Jimmy to give off an occasional electrical charge, which damages two arcade games that were near him. He then runs outside as the diner's owner follows him with a gun. David is able to get the gun away from the owner and uses it to hijack a young woman's car, but since he's only familiar with cars that have a manual transmission with a clutch, he doesn't quite know how to start the car, so he forces the woman named Allison to go with him as their driver. Jimmy's condition continues to deteriorate, and he eventually ends up in a hospital where the staff can't figure out what is wrong with him, but it doesn't matter because he soon disappears right before their eyes. David and Allison drive to California, where David hopes he might be able to find his father or someone else he might know. They stop at what was his father's gas station, and Allison is amazed to see old pictures on a wall showing David with his father, since she really didn't believe his story about being a time traveler. They are then told that David's father died a few years back. I found this to be a very touching scene, as it shows one of the pitfalls of traveling to the future. Another touching scene that followed was when he and Allison show up at Jimmy Parker's ranch, and Jimmy's wife opens the front door, almost in shock, as she recognizes David, who hasn't aged, and explains to him that Jimmy returned, but he never came back. David tries to speak to Jimmy, but he refuses to talk because of how traumatizing the whole incident was for him. As David and Allison are leaving the ranch, they see military police approaching, and a high-speed chase through Jim's vast ranch land ensues. When one of the pursuing vehicles crashes and burns, David salvages documents mentioning Dr. James Longstreet, who was the scientist responsible for the experiment in 1943. So he and Allison go to Longstreet's temporary home at a military base listed on the documents, but only find an assistant who is packing up some items. At gunpoint, David forces the man to take them onto the base, where Longstreet and others are located in an underground bunker. Longstreet explains that his current experiment has created a vortex that is linked to the 1943 experiment, and it is being powered by the generators on the USS Eldridge. If the vortex continues to expand, the entire world will be consumed. David is convinced to be catapulted up into the vortex, where he somehow ends up back on the deck of the Eldridge and quickly destroys the control room, which shuts down the generators. And after briefly checking on his friend Jimmy, who is laying on the deck, He tells them goodbye and leaps off the ship as the Eldridge rematerializes back into the harbor, where it is soon discovered that many of those on board were burned or partially fused in the decks and walls of the ship. Meanwhile, back in 1984, Allison drives to where she thinks she might find David if he was able and willing to come back to her. And he does. So that was just a summary of the movie, as I've left many things out. I not only thought this movie was good, I thought it was very good, and I'm surprised it wasn't much more successful and well-liked. I very much appreciated how everyone involved in the making of this movie, from the producers and the director, along with all the actors, took this story seriously and created what seems more like a reenactment of what happened, despite there being a few scenes that push the boundaries of realism. There are so many little details in this movie that make it special. However, I did read some reviews that mentioned the hairstyles for both the men and women in 1943 weren't period accurate, but if you didn't know, you wouldn't notice. As far as the time travel goes, I only take issue with the scene where Dr. Longstreet tells David, who initially doesn't want to cooperate, that after interviewing survivors of the Eldridge, they stated that it was David who shut down the generators. However, if we are watching the original timeline, then his going back would not have happened yet, so we must be viewing the revised timeline after he did go back. Finally, could someone in the past or now build a device that accidentally creates a time travel vortex? Well, I'm someone who likes to think that almost anything is possible. What do you think? Thank you for watching, and I will talk with you all next time.